She had always loved the sky. From the moment she could remember, the thought of flying filled her with a sense of freedom that nothing else could match. As a child, she would spend hours staring at airplanes slicing through clouds, imagining herself at the controls. While other children dreamed of being astronauts or rock stars, she dreamed of the cockpit, of the engine humming beneath her, and the wind rushing past her in a way that made everything else in the world seem small and unimportant. Growing up, she didn't have a lot of money. Her family was simple and her life was quiet, but she had determination, and determination often counts for more than money. She would find ways to get closer to planes, visiting small airports, volunteering at flying clubs, and soaking up every word of advice any pilot would give her. She was always asking questions, always watching, always learning. While others would see the sky as a playground, she saw it as a classroom. She earned a reputation early on as someone who could take control of a situation calmly. Even as a teenager, she seemed to have instincts that others envied. If a plane had a problem, she would think through it quickly. If the weather turned suddenly, she seemed to predict it before the instruments did. Her instructors noticed it, and some of them quietly told her she had a rare gift. But she didn't care about praise. All she wanted was to be in the air, alone with her thoughts, the engine, and the sky. After finishing school, she found every way she could to learn more about flying. She didn't have a military background, and she didn't have the connections many pilots had. Instead, she trained herself, spending hours with flight manuals, simulators, and small single-engine planes. She practiced takeoffs and landings in fields, learned to read the wind by observing leaves and clouds, and memorized every possible emergency procedure she could find. Her world was small but precise. She knew her plane like a friend, knew its strengths and weaknesses, and respected it in a way most pilots never did. Her nickname, though she rarely used it herself, was Red Falcon. It had been given to her years ago by an old instructor who recognized her extraordinary skill. In the circles that truly knew about her, the name carried weight, but she had never sought fame. Flying was personal for her, a quiet connection to something bigger than herself. She never needed anyone else to understand it, and most people didn't. They saw a small, unassuming pilot, unaware of the history that had been quietly building with each successful flight. On the morning that would change everything, she climbed into her small plane, a tiny aircraft that most people would underestimate the moment they saw it. It was a simple craft, practical and nimble, designed for precision rather than speed or firepower. To someone looking from the ground, it seemed fragile, almost vulnerable. But she trusted it completely. She knew every lever, every button, every sound it made. She ran through her checklist methodically, even though she had done it 1,000 times before. It was a ritual she never skipped. The sky that morning was calm, with a soft layer of clouds drifting lazily above the earth. The sun was low, painting everything in gold, and the wind whispered against the fuselage. She felt a deep sense of peace as the engine roared to life, vibrations running through her hands and arms. This was the moment she lived for, the moment where preparation met instinct, where the outside world fell away, leaving only her and the sky. She took off smoothly, the wheels leaving the ground with a gentle thrum. The landscape below stretched endlessly, fields and rivers, towns and forests, all bathed in morning light. She climbed higher, easing the plane into a rhythm that was natural and familiar. Flying alone had always been her choice. It gave her clarity, a chance to think without interruption, to measure every decision carefully. Even so, she never underestimated the sky. It could be calm one moment and cruel the next. She had learned that lesson early through mistakes, close calls, and quiet nights spent thinking about what could have gone wrong. As she flew, she reflected on how she had arrived at this point. There were moments in her life where she could have turned back, where it would have been easier to follow a safer path. But something inside her had always pushed forward. She had faced doubts, criticism, and setbacks. Some had said she was taking unnecessary risks. Others had questioned her ability to handle challenges. She didn't ignore them, but she also didn't let them define her. She knew her abilities, and more importantly, she knew how to survive. Her journey that day was supposed to be simple. She had planned a routine flight, meant to test a small navigation route, to check some updates in her instruments, and to enjoy a morning alone in the sky. There was nothing extraordinary planned. Yet she felt a familiar tension as she rose above the horizon, a sensation that she had experienced before in moments that later became stories of survival. It was not fear exactly. It was awareness. The sky sometimes whispered warnings to those who could listen, and she had learned to pay attention. Below her, the world went on obliviously. Cars moved along winding roads. Farmers tended their fields, children played in open spaces. None of them had any idea that high above them, a small plane carried a woman who had been trained in ways most people could not imagine, a pilot whose skill could rival some of the best military aviators in the world. The irony was not lost on her. She was small, unassuming, flying alone, and yet she carried history with her, quiet stories that the world might never know. Flying was not just skill, it was trust. She trusted her plane, trusted her instincts, and trusted the knowledge she had built over years of study and practice. Every decision she made in the cockpit was precise. She adjusted her altitude, checked her instruments, and scanned the horizon. The clouds were sparse, but she kept a careful eye on the light, the wind, and the distant shapes that could indicate weather changes or other aircraft. She remembered her early mentors, the few who had seen something in her when no one else had. They had taught her more than just the mechanics of flying. They had taught her patience, how to remain calm under pressure, how to analyze a situation quickly, and how to use what seemed like disadvantages to her advantage. Their lessons had stayed with her, becoming part of her reflexes, so deeply ingrained that she sometimes acted without thinking, yet always with precision. As she continued her flight, she felt the familiar joy of freedom, the sense that nothing in the world could reach her here. It was a solitary peace, a quiet victory over the chaos of life on the ground. The horizon stretched endlessly, and the sky seemed to embrace her. She had flown in many conditions, through storms, through turbulence, through long nights and blinding sunlight. Each flight had added to her skill and her confidence, and she carried that with her now as naturally as breathing. She had reached a point in her life where flying was no longer just a passion. It had become an extension of who she was. Her identity was intertwined with the plane, the controls, and the air around her. Every movement was deliberate, every adjustment thoughtful. She felt connected to something larger than herself, something eternal in the way the wind moved and the clouds shifted. It was a quiet strength that most people would never understand, but for her, it was everything. Little did she know that this morning, so calm and golden, was about to shift in a way she had never anticipated. The routine flight would soon become the beginning of a test unlike any she had faced before. The sky, which had always been her sanctuary, would transform into a stage where skill, instinct, and courage would be pushed to the absolute limit. Even as she soared, unaware of the events about to unfold, she maintained the discipline that had brought her this far. Every detail mattered. The angle of the plane, the pressure on the controls, the engine's hum, the subtle movements of the wind. This was not recklessness. This was mastery. And mastery, she knew, was only useful if it could respond to the unexpected. Flying higher now, she adjusted her course slightly, enjoying the feeling of the plane moving effortlessly beneath her hands. The morning light made the metal gleam, and for a moment the world seemed perfect. There was nothing urgent, nothing threatening, nothing but her, the plane, and the sky. But somewhere far below, far out of sight, forces were already in motion. Forces that would soon notice her. Forces that would test everything she had learned, and forces that would recognize a skill that had long been whispered about but rarely seen. She did not know it yet, but the calm before the storm was already ending. Her instincts, honed over years, would soon be awakened in ways she could never have planned. The quiet morning flight was about to become a story of survival, courage, and skill that few could believe. For now, though, she flew, and the sky was hers. The engine's steady hum, the soft sway of the clouds, and the gentle rush of wind against the plane filled her with peace. She had no idea what was coming, but she was ready, even if she did not know it yet. Flying had taught her that preparation, awareness, and calm could carry a person through any situation, no matter how impossible it seemed. And this day, like every flight, would test that truth. The morning continued quietly at first. The small plane cut through the calm sky, its engine steady and reassuring. She felt a sense of ease, the same feeling she always had when she was alone above the earth. The clouds drifted lazily and the sun's warmth touched the cockpit glass. But she could never let comfort distract her completely. Pilots always watched, always anticipated. That was the difference between someone who survived in the sky and someone who didn't. Without warning, a shadow appeared far ahead, moving too quickly to be a bird or any small plane. Her eyes narrowed, and she adjusted her course slightly, observing. At first she thought it might be another civilian plane, but something didn't feel right. It moved with precision, almost as if it were scanning the skies, and its speed was far beyond anything she had encountered in her normal flights. The sound came next. A low, distant roar that grew rapidly. She felt it in her chest before she even saw it fully. Two sleek gray machines broke the horizon and closed in fast. F-16 fighter jets. They appeared from nowhere, circling with a confidence that only trained pilots could have. Her heart rate increased slightly, though her face remained calm. Years of preparation and instinct kicked in immediately. She had seen military jets in the sky before, but always at a distance. Never had they been so close, never had they surrounded her so completely. The first instinct of many pilots would have been panic, but she didn't panic. She had been trained to respond, to stay composed, and to read the intentions of those who pursued her. Every movement, every decision had to be precise. She took a deep breath, feeling the vibrations of her plane beneath her hands. The jets circled closer, forming a pattern that made it clear she was being watched. Each pilot in those machines was likely scanning her, trying to identify her, trying to decide what to do. She knew she was small and unarmed, and yet she also knew she had advantages they might not expect. Maneuverability, awareness, and the instinct that had carried her through countless difficult flights. She wasn't just a pilot. She was someone who had survived impossible situations before. Her mind raced calmly. She assessed the positions of the jets, their speed, the angle of their flight, and their distance from her plane. Every piece of information mattered. She checked her instruments again, adjusting her altitude slightly. Even small changes could make a difference when larger, faster machines surrounded her. She remembered every lesson she had learned from past mentors, every simulation, every scenario she had practiced in her head 1,000 times. The F-16s tightened their formation, circling her from above and below to the left and right. The sound was deafening now, the roar of engines filling the sky around her. She could see the pilots inside the cockpits, though only briefly through the glare of the sun. Each face was tense, focused, and trained. They were professionals, and they had been tasked with intercepting her. For a moment she felt a thrill, not fear, but a surge of focus. This was exactly the kind of challenge she had trained for in her own way. She adjusted her throttle carefully, keeping the plane steady. Any sudden movement could provoke a reaction, and she needed to control the situation before it controlled her. The jets matched her speed effortlessly, circling as if they expected her to make a mistake. But she didn't make mistakes. She had learned to remain calm in moments when others would have panicked, and she used that skill now. Every movement was deliberate, precise, and measured. Her eyes scanned the sky for any possible exit, any space where she could slip through unnoticed. The terrain below was a patchwork of forests and rivers, small towns and open fields. She considered how she could use the geography to her advantage. She could dive low, hug the ground, use the terrain to break line of sight, or ascend into higher clouds to obscure herself. Each option carried risk, but she weighed them carefully. The radio crackled, a mechanical voice issuing a warning. "Unidentified aircraft, you are in restricted airspace. Identify yourself immediately." She remained silent. Speaking could give them information, reveal hesitation, or confirm their suspicions. Instead, she let her actions speak. Calm, controlled, measured. She knew that pilots watching her would be assessing everything she did, and she intended to remain unpredictable. One of the jets shifted slightly, as if signaling to another. She noticed subtle gestures, small maneuvers that only someone experienced in formation flying would recognize. These were skilled pilots, no doubt about it. They had likely studied her profile, watched her movements, and now they were deciding how serious she was. For a split second, she felt the weight of the situation, but then she reminded herself, fear was a tool if controlled. Panic was a trap. She chose focus instead. The wind picked up slightly as she adjusted her course again, dipping below a thin layer of clouds. The F-16s followed, their engines screaming above her. She noticed one of the jets breaking formation slightly, observing her more closely than the others. Then came a moment that made her pause, a fleeting glance from the pilot and recognition in the eyes, if only for an instant. Her mind raced back to old files, old reports, old whispers in aviation circles. A name she had long carried quietly, a reputation she never wanted to publicize. One of the F-16 pilots knew her, even after all these years. Her pulse remained steady, but her awareness sharpened. This wasn't just an interception. This was someone recognizing skill that was rare, skill that had been rumored but rarely seen. She took a shallow breath, steadying herself. The jets continued to circle, almost as if testing her, measuring her responses. They were likely wondering if she was armed, if she posed a threat, and how much of a challenge she could be. The small plane beneath her hands may have seemed insignificant compared to the advanced fighters surrounding it, but appearances could be deceiving. She had survived far more dangerous encounters than this, relying on skill, calm, and quick thinking. Every move she made now was a communication of its own. A slight bank left, a change in altitude, a gentle correction on the throttle. All of it spoke to her control and awareness. The F-16 pilots noticed, no doubt impressed and cautious at the same time. She felt the thrill of the challenge, the sharp edge of awareness that came only when life demanded her full focus. She had flown alone for years, but encounters like this were rare, and they tested every skill she had honed. She began calculating her options. Could she descend quickly into the valleys below, forcing the larger jets to follow carefully? Could she climb into a higher cloud layer to break line of sight? Could she use sudden, unpredictable maneuvers to buy time? Each choice carried risk, but she considered them carefully as any good pilot would. Her instincts told her that the key was to remain calm and patient, to let the situation unfold while she maintained control. The jets maintained formation, circling in tight arcs, engines screaming and reflecting sunlight off their metallic surfaces. She adjusted her visor, shielding her eyes from the glare, and kept her gaze steady. Every detail mattered. The sound of the engines, the angles of the wings, the rhythm of their movement. She was reading patterns, predicting possible moves, and planning several steps ahead in her mind. This was not a battle of weapons, but a battle of wits and skill. She remembered her training, moments from years ago when instructors had placed her in difficult scenarios, forcing her to make decisions under pressure. She drew on those memories now, combining them with experience, instinct, and careful observation. The sky was no longer just a playground. It was a puzzle, a challenge, and she was determined to navigate it successfully. Time seemed to stretch as she and the jets moved in a silent dance above the land. Each maneuver, each adjustment carried weight. She could feel the tension in the air, subtle yet tangible. The roar of the engines mixed with the quiet hum of her plane, creating a strange symphony of danger and skill. She remained focused, her hands steady, her mind sharp, aware that any misstep could change everything. Then, almost imperceptibly, she noticed a change. One of the F-16s was behaving differently, not with the urgency of a standard interception. There was a hesitation, a recognition that seemed almost personal. Her instincts told her that this pilot knew who she was, someone remembered from the past, someone legendary in their own quiet way. The realization sent a ripple through her thoughts, but she remained outwardly calm, maintaining her course and composure. She knew that what came next would be crucial. The jets could take any action, and she had to be prepared for every possibility. Her small plane was agile, but fragile compared to the machines surrounding her. Every decision, every movement would be critical. She felt the weight of history, skill, and survival pressing down. Yet she embraced it, knowing that this moment was both dangerous and exhilarating. The sky, once calm and golden, had become a stage for a test of skill. Awareness and courage. She felt a strange thrill mixed with the tension, a sense that everything she had learned, every flight, every lesson, had led to this moment. She was not afraid. She was focused. And as the jets tightened their circle, engines screaming and wings glinting in the sunlight, she knew that the encounter would reveal not only skill but character, calm, and the extraordinary ability to survive against impossible odds. The jets had circled her for several tense minutes, their presence both threatening and oddly commanding. She could feel the vibration of the air as they adjusted their speed, the roar of their engines echoing in her ears. She had flown many challenging situations before, but there was something different about this moment. This was not just a test of skill, it was recognition. One of the pilots knew who she was, and that made everything sharper, more dangerous, more precise. Her eyes scanned the cockpits as best she could. Fighter jets were fast and their movements precise, but the human element could never be ignored. Even in the most disciplined formations, instincts and reactions mattered. She saw a flicker of recognition in one pilot's eyes, something almost imperceptible, yet enough to send a ripple of tension through her. That fleeting moment carried history. a memory of missions long past, stories whispered in military circles and skills earned through years of disciplined flying. For her, the recognition did not bring pride. It brought focus. She knew that revealing her presence or skill openly could escalate the situation in unpredictable ways. Her identity was powerful, yes, but it was dangerous to be recognized in these skies. A moment of hesitation or misjudgment could have consequences. She reminded herself that the sky was both playground and battlefield. Every move mattered. Every decision was a step in a delicate balance between survival and exposure. The first jet moved closer, breaking slightly from the formation, its pilot clearly assessing her abilities. She adjusted her plane smoothly, banking gently to the left while keeping her eyes on every wingtip, every instrument. She was aware that this pilot might attempt a maneuver designed to test her reflexes, to force her into a mistake. She didn't flinch. She had trained for this. Every lesson, every simulation, every risky solo flight had led to this moment. Memories surfaced briefly, flashes of old training sessions and long nights of study. Her mentors had emphasized observation and patience above all. They had told her that flying was not about rushing or reacting blindly. It was about seeing patterns, understanding movements, predicting possibilities, and choosing the right path at the right time. She drew on these memories now, letting them guide her hands, her mind, and her instincts. The jets circled closer, forming tighter arcs around her. The roar was deafening, and the wind pressure increased as they approached. She felt the subtle push and pull on her plane as the jets created turbulence in their wake. Her small aircraft rocked slightly, but she adjusted instantly, using her understanding of aerodynamics and her years of experience to keep it steady. She could feel the strain on both the plane and herself, but she welcomed it. Pressure revealed skill, and skill defined survival. Then came the moment that changed everything. One of the jets broke formation entirely, closing in directly in front of her plane. The pilot leaned forward, and she saw him glance over his instruments, eyes narrowing. Recognition was clear. In a clipped voice broken only by static intention, the words came through the radio. "Red Falcon, is that really you?" Time seemed to slow. Her mind raced through memories, missions long past, and moments that had felt like they would never be remembered. She had flown in countless operations, navigated impossible situations, and yet, here in the open sky, years later, her name still carried weight. It was a strange feeling. Validation mixed with danger, pride tempered by the reality that this recognition could escalate the encounter. She had never wanted notoriety, never sought fame, but skill leaves a mark, and some memories were impossible to erase. She did not respond immediately. Silence was a tool. By remaining quiet, she maintained control, letting her actions communicate confidence and precision. The jets continued to circle, but now there was a subtle shift. The pilot who recognized her lingered closer, curious, cautious, almost in awe. The others followed the formation instinctively, trained to respond, but the tension had changed. Recognition had altered the dynamic, introducing a mix of caution and respect into an otherwise threatening situation. She allowed herself a brief glance at the ground far below. Fields and rivers stretched endlessly, untouched by the drama above. Life continued in ignorant peace, unaware that a skilled pilot navigated danger high in the sky. The contrast struck her, how fragile and temporary control could feel on the ground versus the precision and awareness demanded in the air. Every decision mattered here. A slight miscalculation could change everything. She began to calculate her next moves. The jets had her surrounded, but she was not trapped. She could use her plane's agility, the subtle differences in speed and the environment to her advantage. She considered angles, wind patterns, and potential escape routes. She also considered human behavior. Pilots, no matter how trained, reacted emotionally to recognition, surprise, or respect. These factors could be leveraged carefully, strategically. A sudden adjustment in the lead jet made her tense slightly. The pilot was testing her, no doubt. Would she make a mistake? Would she falter under pressure? She responded instantly, banking sharply while adjusting her throttle, maintaining altitude and control. The small plane danced through the turbulence, responding to her commands as if it were an extension of herself. The jets followed, but the formation wavered slightly, revealing the first cracks in their coordinated threat. Her mind worked like a machine, breaking down the situation step by step. If the recognition was genuine, it could be an advantage. If the other pilots learned her identity, it might change their tactics. She needed to stay unpredictable. The small plane, unarmed yet agile, became a tool of strategy. Every maneuver, no matter how subtle, communicated skill without words. The lead pilot adjusted, perhaps impressed, perhaps cautious, and the others mirrored the subtle shift instinctively. She could feel the tension building. The jets were fast, powerful, and armed, yet they moved carefully around her, respecting something unspoken. Recognition had transformed a purely tactical interception into a delicate test of skill and composure. She understood instinctively that the pilot who knew her had a personal stake in the encounter, and that made the dance of the sky both more dangerous and more predictable. The sun shifted slightly, casting shadows across the metallic surfaces of the fighter jets. She adjusted her visor and focused on the instruments and visual cues. Combining experience, observation, and instinct, she made minor course corrections, testing the limits of her plane's agility, watching for reactions. Every movement mattered, every detail counted. The jets adjusted instantly, a subtle display of respect for her ability and her control over the situation. The radio crackled again. "You are in restricted airspace, Red Falcon. Identify your intentions immediately." There was tension in the voice, a mixture of authority, caution, and awe. Recognition had not reduced the risk. It had changed its nature. She remained silent, letting the words hang in the air. Silence communicated confidence, control, and unpredictability. She had learned long ago that silence often spoke louder than words, especially in moments of danger. The lead jet moved again, banking slightly, testing her reactions. She responded smoothly, tilting her plane to compensate, keeping her altitude steady. She had trained for moments like this, relying on reflex, experience, and knowledge of aerodynamics. Every subtle adjustment sent a message. She was in command, calm, and capable. The jets circled, engines roaring, forming a tense but delicate choreography high above the land. Memories of past missions, old allies and mentors passed through her mind briefly. They had always emphasized adaptability, awareness, and patience. Flying was not about force. It was about understanding the environment, the tools, and the people involved. She applied those lessons now, aware that recognition had created an opening, an opportunity to remain in control even when surrounded by machines far more powerful than her small plane. She noticed the subtle signs in the formation: slight hesitation, micro-adjustments, shifts in altitude and position. These were human reactions, influenced by recognition and uncertainty. She had learned to read such signs instinctively. It was not arrogance, it was experience. The small plane beneath her hands responded instantly, shifting, banking, adjusting, becoming an extension of her intuition and awareness. For a moment, the sky felt suspended, as if waiting for her next move. The jets maintained their presence, engines screaming, yet they now moved with a mixture of caution and curiosity. The encounter had shifted from a purely tactical challenge to a complex interaction of skill, recognition, and human instinct. She remained fully aware, calculating every movement, watching for opportunities, and preparing for whatever came next. The recognition had added a new layer to the encounter. It was not just about surviving the jets. It was about navigating a situation where knowledge of her identity altered the behavior of those around her. The challenge was no longer simple interception. It was a test of composure, skill, and strategy against experienced professionals who now had both respect and curiosity in their approach. She felt the adrenaline, not as panic but as heightened awareness. Her mind was sharp, every decision deliberate, every movement calculated. She knew that the encounter could last only so long before someone made a critical decision. The sky, vast and open, was now a stage for a silent battle of skill, focus, and instinct. The sky had transformed from calm gold to a tension-filled stage where every movement mattered. The jets circled her tiny plane like predators testing a prey they were unsure how to catch. She felt the air vibrating differently now, the pressure of the engines around her, the constant roar mixing with her own focus. It was no longer just recognition that had changed the situation. It had become a dance of skill, instinct, and sheer nerve. She adjusted her course slightly, tilting the wings and feeling the small plane respond as if it were an extension of her body. The turbulence created by the jets could have thrown a lesser pilot off balance, but she moved with it, letting the shifts in the air guide her. Every movement was precise, every reaction calculated. The sky was alive with the sound of engines and the hum of her own craft, each contributing to a symphony of tension that demanded her full attention. The lead jet, the one whose pilot had recognized her, tightened its formation, trying to anticipate her next move. The other jets followed, but they were cautious, wary of what they had just seen. A small plane, nimble and unpredictable, responding with uncanny skill. She had no weapons, no shields, nothing but her experience, intuition, and the plane itself. Yet she felt an odd sense of power. The danger made her senses sharper, her decisions faster, and her instincts more reliable than ever. She banked sharply to the left, diving slightly to gain momentum. The jets followed, but not perfectly. Their size and speed made sudden, precise shifts more difficult. Her small plane responded instantly, tilting and rising in a fluid motion that kept her just out of reach. For the first time, she saw hesitation in the movements of the lead pilot. That flicker of doubt, however brief, was a rare gift. She had been trained to notice these tiny cracks in the most disciplined of adversaries. As she weaved through the air, she considered her surroundings. The landscape below offered opportunities she could use if needed. Valleys, small forests, rivers, and hills created a natural maze. She could descend, forcing the jets to adjust, or climb quickly to obscure herself in cloud cover. Every option was risky, but she calculated each one calmly. Experience had taught her that risk was never the enemy. Panic was, and she did not panic. The jets adjusted to her movements, but their reactions were no longer flawless. She noted subtle signs in their behavior, slight overcompensations, micro-pauses, and brief gaps in formation. Recognition had caused a subtle change in their approach. They were wary, uncertain, trying to reconcile what they knew about her with what they were witnessing. That uncertainty was her opportunity, and she would use it carefully. She banked again, this time rising sharply, cutting through a thin layer of clouds. The jets mirrored her, engines screaming, but there was a difference in their precision now. One of the pilots hesitated mid-turn, eyes narrowing, likely remembering reports or stories of her legendary skills. She felt no triumph, only focus. Every second was a calculation, every maneuver a test of awareness, courage, and control. Her hands moved smoothly over the controls, adjusting the plane with practiced ease. She was aware of every shift in wind pressure, every sound from the engines around her, every subtle indication of their intentions. The jets could try to intimidate her, but they could not predict her next moves entirely. That unpredictability, born from experience and instinct, gave her a delicate edge in a situation that could have been overwhelming. A sharp dip, a sudden rise, a subtle curve. She moved the plane with precision. The jets responded, but she could see the difference now. They were professionals, but they were human, and humans made mistakes under pressure. The lead pilot, the one who recognized her, watched closely, perhaps trying to anticipate her next move. But her mind was already several steps ahead, analyzing angles, speed, and potential responses before they could even execute them. For a moment, the sky seemed to stretch endlessly, a vast arena where skill, instinct, and courage were being tested. The roar of engines filled the air, a constant reminder of the stakes. She felt her heart steady, her senses sharp, and her focus absolute. Every maneuver, every tilt, every adjustment was a statement. She was in command, calm, and fully aware. The F-16s may have been faster and more powerful, but she had agility, strategy, and instinct on her side. She began to push the limits of her plane's capabilities, using every inch of space, every curve of the sky. She dove, banked, and climbed, testing not just her own skill but the limits of the jets around her. The lead pilot followed closely, eyes intense, occasionally gesturing to the others. Their formation shifted slightly, no longer perfectly synchronized. She noticed it instantly. That slight imperfection was all she needed to maintain her advantage. As she maneuvered, she remembered past flights where the unexpected had tested her in ways no one else could understand. Storms, mechanical failures, sudden emergencies. She had faced them all and learned to remain calm, analytical, and precise. Those lessons were alive in her now. The sky had become a chessboard, each movement deliberate, each maneuver calculated to keep her in control. She dove again, skimming just above a river, the reflection of the sun sparkling off the water. The jets followed, but the turbulence and narrow space forced them to adjust more cautiously. Her small plane handled the shifts with ease, her body responding instinctively to every movement. She felt a thrill, not fear, but pure engagement, the way a musician feels when every note aligns perfectly in a complex composition. The lead pilot adjusted, trying a subtle maneuver to anticipate her dive. She saw it coming, countered it with a slight bank, and used the resulting gap to gain a small but significant advantage. The other jets moved to compensate, but their movements were now reactive, not instinctive. Recognition had changed everything. They were no longer just pursuing a target. They were facing a pilot whose skill they had only heard about and now witnessed firsthand. Her mind remained calm, but her senses were alive in a way that few could understand. She noticed the subtle changes in the air pressure, the sound of engines approaching and retreating, the way the wind shifted over her wings. Every detail mattered. She was not just flying. She was reading the environment, predicting the jet's responses and choosing the exact moment to act. It was a delicate balance of risk and control. As the jets tightened again, she executed a series of complex maneuvers, rising, twisting, and banking with precision. The lead pilot followed closely, eyes flicking to instruments and her plane in rapid succession. The other jets struggled to maintain the perfect formation, adjusting constantly. She felt a quiet satisfaction, not arrogance but acknowledgement that her skills were more than capable of matching theirs in this moment. The sun glinted off the lead jet's canopy, momentarily blinding her. She adjusted her visor, corrected her course, and continued the maneuver. The jets responded, but the subtle hesitation persisted. Recognition, respect, and caution had altered their behavior, giving her room to operate where she otherwise might have been trapped. She felt the exhilaration of complete awareness, every sense tuned to the sky, the plane, and the pilots around her. She began to consider her next move carefully. The terrain below offered opportunities to break the formation entirely, to use hills, forests, and valleys to her advantage. She calculated angles, speed, and timing, ensuring that every action was precise. She could feel the jets reacting, the lead pilot observing her, the others adjusting instinctively. The dance was no longer random. It was a complex interaction of skill, observation, and anticipation. With a sudden tilt, she dropped slightly, skimming a forest line. The jets followed, but the narrow space forced them to slow, adjust, and react. She banked sharply, climbing rapidly as they struggled to maintain formation. Every movement was deliberate, designed to exploit the differences between her small, agile plane and the larger, more powerful jets. She was small, unarmed, and yet completely in command. The lead pilot, recognizing her skill and perhaps understanding her intent, maintained a cautious distance, observing, calculating, and adjusting. The others followed instinctively, but the formation wavered slightly, a subtle but telling change. Recognition had introduced a variable they had not anticipated, a small plane with extraordinary skill and composure. She felt a quiet satisfaction in the challenge. The sky had become a proving ground, a test of everything she had learned. Every maneuver, every tilt, every adjustment was a demonstration of control and awareness. She was not reckless. She was deliberate, precise, and fully engaged. The F-16s may have been faster and more powerful, but she had adaptability, insight, and instinct on her side. As she executed another sharp turn, cutting through a thin cloud layer, she allowed herself a brief mental note. This encounter was far from over, but she had established something crucial. The jets were no longer blindly aggressive. They were cautious, attentive, and aware that she was not a standard pilot. She had gained space, respect, and the subtle advantage of unpredictability. For a moment, the world below seemed distant, irrelevant, as the dance in the sky took center stage. The roar of engines, the pressure of wind, and the precision of movement combined into a tense, exhilarating symphony. She was fully alive, every sense focused, every instinct sharp. She was small in the sky, but in that moment she was a force, a master of the air and fully aware